what you want, when you want it, where you want it. This is The Mesh.
U.S. Health Advisors want you to know your health coverage does not have to be complicated. If you aren't happy with your insurance plan, there are unlimited and comprehensive medical plan options available to you right now. U.S. Health Advisors offers solutions which can't be found anywhere else. They can even offer you the ability to purchase more coverage if and when you need it. U.S. Health Advisors offers fair rates and no surprises. Sounds nice, doesn't it? If you'd like to know more, contact U.S. Health Advisors at 828-554-3032 or by email at daniel.bryant@ushadvisors.com. Footcandle Films. Film news and reviews from two guys who really like movies.
This episode is brought to you by the Footcandle Film Society. For a schedule of upcoming screenings and membership information, visit the Society's website at www.footcandle.org.
Hello and welcome to a very special edition of Footcandle Films here on the Mesh.tv. My name's Alan Jackson. This is Chris Fry with me. We are both co-directors and co-founders of the Footcandle Film Society and Footcandle Film Festival. And we are here just hours away after having watched
Cats.
Yes.
Yeah, I can't wait to talk about it. There's been a lot of stuff about it's such a spectacle and everything.
We've got a 2-hour discussion of Cats planned right now.
Awesome.
To jump into.
It's big enough just to talk about that alone. It's such a big holiday
because there's
movie.
no other big film starting out this weekend.
Cats.
So we'll maybe table Cats for another time when we have more time to talk about it.
Oh, okay.
But as it is right now, we kind of need to address a film that we just recently saw within the last 24 hours. And that is the latest Star Wars, The Rise of Skywalker. That's going to be our only review today. We're going to go through that because it's just so critical. Chris and I have sat down and discussed the last 4 or 5 Star Wars movies that have come out in our series here. This is the supposed last one of this Skywalker saga. So we want to dedicate this whole special episode to just this discussion. So Chris, you ready to jump right into this?
Sure.
You and I have not discussed this yet. We both recently saw it at separate screenings over the last 12 to 24 hours. So now we're going to have our first chance to sit down and talk about it. This is the latest from director J.J. Abrams. It is Star Wars, The Rise of Skywalker.
It's an instinct. A feeling. Force brought us together. We're not alone. Good people will fight if we lead them.
People keep telling me they know me. No one does.
But I do.
So, Chris, with that was a part of the trailer from The Rise of Skywalker. We have the ending of the Skywalker saga partially written by J.J. Abrams, but directed by J.J. Abrams, who was also responsible for The Force Awakens, Episode 7, where we took a detour in the series with Rian Johnson, The Last Jedi, Episode 8. We're now back to J.J. Abrams with Episode 9. So, Chris, I'm just going to go ahead and lay this out there. I really wrestled with how to start talking about this film. There are several ways I could go with this discussion, this setup. Do I talk about the fact that it's maybe some of the worst writing I've seen in a Star Wars movie to date? And I feel like it was an overdone plot, overwritten, way too many plot conveniences, way too many J.J. Abrams MacGuffins for me to shake a stick at. Could I talk about the fact that it's a complete undoing of The Last Jedi? We're taking all of the great elements that Rian Johnson threw on the table and deciding that they're going to find a way to flush them down the toilet every single step of the way. Could I talk about the complete overdone fan service done throughout this film, where the entire film seems to be catered to, I want to make fans happy, so I'm going to give fans what I think they need every single scene along the way. So there are several different angles I could take in talking about this film. Or I could talk about the fact that at the end of the day, I actually had a fun time with this film. So Chris, what angle are you taking with this, and where does this film land with you? I am so anxious to hear your take on this film. Rise of Skywalker, go.
This is one of those films. Normally, I reserve this for documentaries. You walk out of documentary, and if you liked it, awesome. And, you may have a hard time saying why you liked it. And if you didn't like it, you may have a hard time saying why you didn't like it, because it's somebody's life. You don't know how to quite quantify your pleasure at watching the movie. Even though this isn't a documentary, there's so much baggage that comes along with one of these Star Wars movies. It is the 9th one in the Star Wars saga. We've had independent films or, kind of standalone things like Solo and Rogue One that, some people really hate. And so, but it's hard to separate the fandom from the movie, from all the stories you hear surrounding it. Did I like this film? No. And it's hard for me to articulate why. I mean, there again, you mentioned I saw this film 8 hours ago. I went home at 1:30 in the morning. So, so it's kind of a lot to say. I think the writing, you hit on something there. There's a lot going on, and there really didn't need to be. It was kind of like they were justifying the running time. It's a typical Star Wars movie. It's over 2 hours. Give people their money's worth. But the stuff that's going on, like you said, I think it's the amount of MacGuffins that didn't really need to be there. And normally I like stuff like that. But in this sense, it just seemed kind of wasted. For instance, we'll avoid spoilers.
We will get to spoilers in a little bit. We're going to kind of talk over broad overview,
stuff.
And then here a little bit later, we'll give you fair warning. We're going to jump into more detailed spoilers.
A beloved character dies, and then, doesn't die. That right there, okay, that was one of my first instances of like, okay, but I can see how they could justify why that happened, but still it just felt very flimsy and very kind of dumb. It was like, they needed something to happen for a character to have a realization, but it was such a dumb way to do it. It could have been done. The ideas themselves weren't bad, but the execution of those ideas, the ideas in the script weren't bad, but just the way they were written, like you said, poorly written and then poorly kind of executed and directed. There's something else, which, hear me out, from the very opening credits of this movie, I was worried. The opening crawls of every Star Wars movie, yeah, they're kind of, in a way, hokey or whatever, but you just kind of, you get in the galaxy, long, you get that, then you get the Star Wars logo, and then you have the crawl. Some of them are extremely goofy, but some of them it's just kind of like, okay, here's what's happened since last time. You kind of need to be brought up to speed. I have never, gasped almost at what it was saying. I think the line was something along the lines of "the dead speak," I think is one of the, and I was like, what? And it wasn't like, oh, that's interesting, but it was just kind of like, that just is really silly. And I think that was what struck me, was like, wow, I've never seen, you get silliness and other elements of comedy sometimes in the Star Wars films, but in the opening crawl, that just seemed really odd. And it was, I don't know. And so that immediately kind of set the tone for the film. And unfortunately, it never recovered for that for me. And those are two things that aren't spoilery, because I won't say why they say, but it just, overall, the film didn't work for me. I think if you're a diehard Star Wars fan, sure, go see it. It does have some good things to it, and I'll be sure to mention those. But yeah, my immediate reaction, even though you and I've talked about it on the show, we'd seen, apparently the entire script was leaked out before this film even came out. I didn't read it, stayed away from it. But I just, even though I went in with low expectations because I was kind of on the Rian Johnson Last Jedi high, I kind of feel like if you like The Force Awakens, you'll probably like this. But I feel like... Did
you like it better or worse than The Force Awakens?
I liked it less.
Really?
Yeah. And I think the reason why is because I could excuse certain things happening in The Force Awakens as fan service because it was reinventing just enough that I was like, well, okay, it's kind of rebooting the franchise, so to speak, introducing a lot of new characters. That's something else in this film that made no sense to me. We're closing out this saga. We already have enough characters. Don't really feel the need to introduce any new ones. Oh, but we're going to. Mm-hmm. And why? Why?
I know why, but I'm not. I mean, I know why.
Well, we can some spoiler. But I have never rolled my eyes at a Star Wars film as much as I rolled my eyes at this film. Mm-hmm. Even and because it just seemed like it was just dumb, in my opinion. So, what are some of your thoughts? You kind of laid some of the things you thought of.
So I'll go ahead and say on the record.
Without doing spoilers.
I had a lot of problems with this film. A lot of problems. A lot of things I can pick out. A lot of all focused to me on writing and plotting of the film. The biggest issues for me. However, if I stand back and do away with all the plot machinations and just talk about the overall what the film does, I'm okay with it. And I actually, by the end, was having a good time with it, mainly because I had dropped off all expectations at that point and was just going in for the pure entertainment value.
Sure.
If I actually sit there and draw out the plot, the story, what's happening here, it's horrible. But if I pull it back to a 50-foot or a 200-foot view and say, okay, this character, this happens to this character, and then these characters end up in these ways, I'm satisfied with that big picture view. I just hate the way it got there. I hate all the details of it going through the plot the way it did. So, and again, we'll get into more spoiler stuff when we get to that.
Sure.
It did bother me that almost every decision that was made in The Last Jedi, this film seemed absolutely intent on saying, we're going to revert, we're going to change that. And it's where I think fan service, pleasing fans, has gone overboard with this film. I think this was 90% of the choices made in this film, I think, are just, I want fans to like this movie. And I don't appreciate that because it seemed way too made for that purpose.
Yeah, I would agree. It just, and what was interesting to me, I wonder if you pick, and without getting into spoilers, fan service as far as fans of a Star Wars film, which, the number of callbacks and everything got to be too much for me, but also fans of another filmmaker instead of Steven Spielberg. Mm-hmm. There were some references to, which I know Abrams is a big fan of, Super 8 was like an homage. Without getting into too much detail, there's kind of a relic or an artifact that's used to kind of discover a location. It was very Well of Lost Souls and all this kind of stuff going on. And it didn't really, it was just, basically it was to extend the running time of the film. And it's just,
it was a device to find another device, which is just
J.J. Abrams.
Why not just find the first device? Why not just, that's what you're looking for?
And it just, it just kind of got tiresome.
Yeah,
and I
did.
just,
Yeah, there again, that's the plot details I'm talking about. When I start looking at those, I'm like, oh my God, this is really poorly written and poorly executed. But if I do away with all the plot details and just say, what happened to Rey? What happened to Kylo Ren?
Right.
What happened to the main characters by the end of the film? I'm like, yeah, I liked where everything went. And I'll even tell you one thing that we have shown concern about.
Lamented
about a certain character that was being brought back in. I actually thought, going in expecting the worst, I actually think they did a decent job with it. The fact that it's kind of spelled out for you, even in that opening crawl, which, yes, was a little campy, but I'm like, okay, they're just going to go ahead and lay it out there. It's not a surprise thing. It's not
and there again, it's like you're saying, that's perfect summation of kind of my feelings without going into spoilers. It's not the fact that they laid out the idea. It's just how it was done.
Sure. Yeah,
the writing of that opening crawl
was sloppy.
Because, you're right. The individual, the kind of one key player that comes back in, you and I were really worried about it. And actually, it works.
I thought it was
the
kind of cool.
execution is kind of bumpy and stuff,
cool.
but overall, kind of cool.
The visuals behind him and kind of again, we're getting a spoiler a bit. Even there's a moment where you realize this is a much bigger thing with him back, and it actually kind of starts to make sense why he's back. I'm like, okay, I'm totally down with that whole area of the film now. That was the part I was the most worried about. And I'm actually kind of digging
those instances were some of the better parts of the film, whereas all the stuff that was kind of glommed on to that storyline, that's what didn't work.
No, you're right. It's the details. It's the plotting is what killed this film. Yeah. But the ideas, the big picture stuff, and I think the way it all resolved and it came to an end, I was pretty happy with. I will admit the ending, it's over the top fan service. Yeah, it's over the top. Let's tug at your heartstrings and all that. It worked for me. The last 10, 15 minutes, I'm like, okay, this hasn't completely redeemed this film, but I'm coming away with a positive feeling where the first hour of the film had me really scared to death because it was just felt like so overwritten, so overdone, so much going on that I just didn't feel like they were letting stuff breathe or really naturally take place. So I'm really mixed on this film. I had a good time with it by the end. I'm kind of talking with my son on the way home. We're kind of geeking out about some parts of the film and all that. But yeah, if I sit down and really look at it and say like, boy, but it was a mess. I mean, it was an absolute mess to get to the point it got to for me. Something else that,
I can speak to that annoyed me about it, and it's just a particular taste thing, it's with a lot of criticism. The love boatness of it all became very tedious. Rey and Kylo, Rey and Finn, Rey and Poe, Poe and Zori, Finn and Jana, Jana or whatever her name was, Finn and Rose. Like you're saying, who are you? Yeah, they don't make any sense why they're there. It's just how much more can we complicate, like who likes who? And I'm like, I don't care about that. I don't want to care about that. That's not.
They introduced 3 characters in this movie that really had no reason to be there. Did not add anything to the movie in my opinion.
Okay, so Zori?
Which one is that?
That is the one that wore the body armor type thing.
Yeah, the one that Poe knew from.
Yes.
Zori. I liked her character, but it had no point in being in this movie.
Agreed.
And now the one who gets to know Finn by the end.
Jana, or whatever.
Again, interesting, but didn't need to be in this movie.
Correct.
Like totally pointless to be in this movie.
Correct.
And then I like Richard E. Grant. I thought he's good.
That's not where I thought you were going.
But they introduced him, and I was like, okay, I don't understand why we needed him because we already had people playing these roles. Like it just seemed a little superfluous to add him in. Although I liked him, I thought he was good.
I liked him, and I think I could definitely defend him a little more.
All right.
I thought you were going to say Babu Frick, the droid doctor.
No, I like that.
I hated it.
Did you? I liked it. You got to. It's Star Wars. You got to have one cute puppet animated character that's kind of new each time. You had the Porgs in the last one. I mean, and I don't know. They didn't overuse him. The 2 or 3 times he pops up, I thought he was kind of funny.
The last one was the worst when he popped up. And they started doing that. There again, it was like we got to cram stuff in. Opening minutes of the film, Finn is walking through. I think he's in the Millennium Falcon at this point. I can't remember. He's in a ship. And he comes around the corner and he sees this alien creation, this, tentacled, orange, yellowish looking thing. And like immediately is like so happy to see him. And of course says his name. So we know which character. And I'm like, what? Why? And then the fact that that's just dropped. I just why?
Well,
why did
I don't understand.
Things didn't make any sense to me.
I completely agree. I don't agree with on the last chapter of the film of the saga. And you're trying to you've got some great characters with Rey, Finn, and
which
Poe.
He did a great job introducing in The Force Awakens.
He did a great job. That was my favorite thing about The Force Awakens was the introduction of those 3 characters and seeing their dynamic. The one thing I will fault The Last Jedi for is they separated those 3. Those 3 didn't have hardly any moments together in Last Jedi, which I do think was one misgiving I had with that film.
See, I could defend that. But
well, I can defend it, but I missed it. I mean, it was just something I felt like was missing. J.J. Abrams did do a good job of bringing the 3 of them back together and seeing the interplay with them. And I love those 3 characters, so I was happy with that. You don't need anybody else. You've got the 3 of them. You've got Kylo Ren. You've brought back this one character from all the other movies, and I thought it was okay the way they brought him back. That's all you need. That is all the characters you need. You got Chewbacca, you got Leia, all the people that are still remaining. Cool. do not introduce new characters with all new backstories that have no impact on the main story whatsoever.
I thought it was really pathetic. And I guess this is what you're talking about, kind of flushing stuff down the toilet from Last Jedi. Rose Tico, the way she was handled was pathetic.
Oh, it was horrible.
It was terrible.
It was almost a slap in the face to show her occasionally, and you realize that she's just regulated to working a computer on the ground, and that's basically it.
Is it a spoiler to talk about the character that shows up in this movie that has not appeared in the new movies yet? That's kind of the classic character. I think he's in.
He's in the trailer.
Okay, so I can say it. I can say his name. Yeah, Billy D. Williams.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, that one.
Okay,
yeah, that's like on the poster.
So,
the name.
Lando. Okay,
yeah, Lando. Yeah.
I thought that was terrible, and I don't think he did a bad job. But I kind of felt like when watching him, he was kind of like, okay, what am I supposed to really do here? Why am I here? He didn't really know why he was there. The actor, I don't feel like he was happy to be there, to be nice to fans, but he's kind of like, what am I doing?
That's it. It's fan
and the
service.
fact that he shows up more than once, he's like, okay, I still kind of don't know what I'm doing here, guys, but I'm just gonna, say some things that sound wise and keep going. He delivers one of the creepiest lines that I think I've ever heard in a Star Wars film. And this
You're talking about his last line?
I don't think it's his very last one, but now I understand it's a callback, but it is a really creepy callback when he says, "Give my love to Leia," and he's like, "Do it yourself." Like there's just kind of this like weird. I don't.
Well, I didn't. I got. I mean, to me,
yeah, it's not.
To me, it's a fan service joke.
Yeah,
because I know, but you remember in the films, he had a thing for Leia.
Sure.
He was always flirting with her and all that. So
right.
I mean,
but
it's total callback fan service. But
it was kind of creepy to me. It was creepy.
Well, I was talking about his last line where he's talking to Jannah.
Oh, yeah.
About Jannah's past.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, well, let's go
explore that. I'm like,
and that to me is like, okay.
Here's another movie about to happen.
No, it's coming to Disney Plus, a new show, I'm sure. It's going to be the adventures of these guys. That's the kind of things that just infuriated me with the film. But again, when I pull back and look at the big picture of the film, I don't think about those little subplots. I am focused on Rey, Kylo Ren, Finn, and Poe. And I will say, for those four characters, and we can talk about Rey and Kylo because that's a big plot of the film.
Right.
I dug it. I thought it worked. I don't like the details. There's a lot of little details in between that didn't work for me, but their storylines in general worked for me. And I think if it wasn't for those storylines and the way they were resolved, I would detest this film. As it is now, I'm more infuriated with this film that it still got me emotionally and it still got me invested with these main characters, but to do it in such a sloppy way to get there.
And I think regardless of, I was surprised that J.J. Abrams, who's directed several movies, I've never thought of any of his movies, regardless of whether I really liked them or not, as sloppy. And that's what was kind of surprising to me was I felt like this was sloppy.
Now, we'll just say from a behind the scenes standpoint, okay, I get it. J.J. Abrams was not supposed to do this movie.
Who was?
Colin Trevorrow.
Which he's credited as being one of the script writers.
That's right.
So,
Colin Trevorrow, supposedly, his whole script and idea for episode 9 centered around Leia. Okay. Carrie Fisher passed away.
Right.
All right. Sucks. That really sucks, obviously, on a much deeper level than just the movies.
Sure.
But it did impact this movie. Sure. J.J. Abrams was brought in probably in Star Wars development time last minute to make changes and to get it on board. Then I'm sure Lucasfilms, seeing the blowback they got from Last Jedi, is probably throwing in a lot of, hey, look, fix these things, make fans happy, do all this.
Right.
So, okay, the messiness of the film, I don't think lies solely on J.J. Abrams' lap. But obviously, he's the one that is steering the ship.
And maybe he did the best that he could with the script that he was given.
Somebody I heard on another this morning, I was listening to some other just news about it, and somebody made a perfect. They said, yeah, he was dealt a poker hand that there's no real way to win with. Did he do the best he could do with it?
Hard to say, knowing what he was given.
I don't think he was going to do the best he could do with it, but I think it probably could have been worse if it wasn't somebody like J.J. Abrams at least trying to steer the ship to do it. I everything else I've got to talk about really, well, I'm only just talk generality. I thought Daisy Ridley and I thought Adam Driver were both really good.
I agree. I said I would touch on some positives here in the spoiler-free part. I thought, Daisy Ridley, Adam Driver, they, to me, carry the film.
Yes,
They're
I agree.
Star power. So
I like Oscar Isaac's Poe. I felt like he was all just comic relief in this film. He did have a moment towards the end of the film that I thought was really nice, kind of where he had to take on kind of a leadership role. And I thought it was done well. And he's a good actor. I like him.
I think he was more frustrating for me in this one. Yeah.
Now, the one that's frustrating for me was John Boyega as Finn. He's a good actor, but they never have figured out what to do with that character.
See, and I felt like that was kind of what they did with Finn. I mean, what they did with Poe in this one too.
See,
I thought about them both that way.
Poe is inspired by Leia. He's a future leader, but he's struggling to find out how to be a good leader. They played with that. I like that idea a little bit. Finn, I still to this day can't tell you what exactly his role is in the film. To be the best friend of Rey, I guess. That's about all I can really say. They never explored in this whole new trilogy what it really meant.
How many best friends does Rey need?
Right, Rey. Yeah.
Let's get the
I
love
don't
triangles
understand
going.
with Finn. You have such an interesting dynamic of someone who was a stormtrooper. That was the whole thing introduced in Force Awakens.
You know what would be better than
that?
was cool. 2 people in the movie that used to be for the Empire.
Oh, there's a whole tribe of people that used to be stormtroopers. Yeah. But Finn, they never explored that. That never seemed to be anything. Finn kind of, I don't want to spoil it, Finn starts to show some level of abilities, but they never touch on it, explore it. It was just like
messy.
See, the more I talk about that, the more I get frustrated by this film. But I'm emotionally, I'm on board with it. But man, technically, it is a mess.
I'll say, my kind of summary for this non-spoiler portion, to me, which surprised me, it felt like Lucas had returned to direct this final capstone to the franchise. It was entertaining.
Yeah.
But it was a mess. And it was something that, had he been directing, I'm like, well, not surprised. It's kind of like Lucas, for all his faults that I feel like he does have, he's a great idea man. We've talked about that on the show before. This had a lot of great ideas. It was just the execution. And Lucas was terrible with dialogue. Man, there was some stuff in here that was terrible.
It was some bad dialogue. But the one thing I will say J.J. Abrams will always have over Lucas is working with actors. J.J. Abrams knows how to direct actors. And I do feel like he got good performances out of several people in the film because of it. But I agree, the plotting felt very Lucas. It felt very prequel-ish. It's a lot of get to here, and then we got to go land on this planet, and then we've got to go find this thing, and then we got to go meet this new character, and then we got to go do this, and that felt very much like
the planet jumping was a little insane.
Mm-hmm. That's the part of the film where I started to get worried because I'm just like, you're doing way too much going on, and I don't feel any of it's landing.
And the planet they jump to where they're just basically having like a huge festival is like, okay.
Yeah. That was pointless.
Pointless. Yeah.
Again, if that felt very Lucas-driven, like I want to show this planet, I want to show this idea, but there's really no reason to be.
You can say to comparison to something I really like, Last Jedi, I love the film, but I will say Canto Bight was initially a weak link. On revisiting it, I was like, well, okay, it's still weak, but I can see a little bit more of what they were going for here. The festival planet.
There's nothing.
Nothing.
So I will say, before we go into spoilers, I'm going to say I still ultimately had a fun time with this movie by the end, as long as I don't think about it too hard. And acting, I thought, was fine and good, especially Driver and Ridley.
Sure.
Very good. Probably the best Daisy Ridley's been in this trilogy, I think, from an acting perspective. I thought she was really good. Adam Driver is always good. I like his role. I really like his Kylo Ren, and there were some interesting choices made with his character that we can talk about a little bit later on. And I will say another positive on the film. Okay. It's probably the most beautiful Star Wars film I've seen. Cinematography-wise.
There's a lot of cinematography going on.
Visual design was gorgeous.
I agree. There's visuals of Star Destroyers and coming up from waves. And actually everything that has to do with waves, there's like a lot of water going around and stuff around certain Death Stars and all this kind of stuff. Really striking, beautiful stuff.
Absolutely.
That
definitely helped my appreciation of the film to some degree. And then again, I did ultimately like where the film landed with the primary characters. to leave it at that.
Okay.
Although I just hated everything that happened to get there.
Not that these matter, but I'm really curious because they don't, but I'm curious to see your resultant star rating in Letterboxd.
Well, I've already determined my 1 through 9 ranking of these Star Wars films. I know. I'm very clear where I am with that.
To geek out, that's kind of interesting because immediately after the film was over, I kind of thought where my star rating was, and it's still a little fluctuating, but ranking wise, yeah, I'm really curious to see where this film falls as far as yeah.
You and I differ on comparison to Force Awakens. I like this better than Force Awakens.
Yeah, and maybe after I see it a second time, maybe
I do like it better than Force Awakens because I felt like where Force Awakens was just purely a carbon copy of A New Hope, and actually every Star Wars movie tried to be it was a carbon copy of. This one definitely had some carbon copy moments, especially to Return of the Jedi. But I felt like it was at least different enough and added enough uniqueness to it. And I like more. There were more cool elements of this film, moments I liked. Where Force Awakens, I've never really had a desire to go back and watch it again. I just haven't. I saw it twice in the movies. Since I saw it in the movie theater, I don't think I've seen it again. I just really haven't had a desire to. Last Jedi, I've seen a couple times since I saw it in the theater because I love it. Force Awakens, I never really went back and revisited because there just wasn't anything there that grabbed me at all. This film, there's some moments that grab me. There's some moments that I don't mind wanting to go back and revisit or show to somebody else. So
see, and
but anyway, on my rating side, it's still better than the prequels for me.
Okay.
Prequels are still bottom 3, no matter what. Force Awakens is the next on the list. There is a big gap for me between the prequels and Force Awakens. I generally thought Force Awakens was okay. Just didn't love it. This one is right above Force Awakens. Then we start to go Return of the Jedi. Then we go like original Star Wars, A New Hope. Then we go Last Jedi. Then Empire Strikes Back. So that's my rating.
Okay.
I'm very confident with it at this point. I do think these prequels, the J.J. Abrams one, are the least of the non-prequel movies.
Got you.
That makes sense. Rian Johnson's is pretty darn close to one of the best. Still can't top Empire Strikes Back, but it's up there. And then the original Star Wars and Return of the Jedi are kind of, they're good, they're classic, there are elements of them I love, and obviously they're very important to my childhood and me growing up. So they're always going to be in that top tier, but that's where I am with this.
Okay. Spoiler.
Do we want to go into spoilers?
Sure.
Okay. So here's the deal, guys. We have nothing else on this show other than talking spoilers about Star Wars. So if you have not seen it or you don't want to be spoiled, you're done. You're free to go. You can shut it off. We'll see you at the next episode. Take care. But if you want to hear us talk more spoilers, we're going to do that right now. Tell you what, let's play a little bit more of the trailer for a few more seconds. That'll be our little transition there. So.
You're coming together. Is your undoing.
All right. Sounds like a good transition there for us.
Yeah, please cut it off before C-3PO says, I'm just looking at my friends one last time. Please cut that off.
Well, okay, so there were two moments in the film, since you're keen on that one, that I thought were cheap and done.
Heartstring moments.
But yet immediately undone just to be fan servicing again. One was the death you mentioned, or supposed death of a character.
We're spoiler. Go ahead. Let's
that's like Chewbacca. Yeah. It looks like Chewbacca dies. It looks like Rey is responsible for killing Chewbacca.
And had they followed through on that, that would have been amazing.
You talk about a character development moment for Rey, where she has to live the rest of the film knowing her not able to control her powers killed one of the most beloved members of the Star Wars universe.
That would have been to me Rian Johnson level. You know what? I'm making this movie. I'll do some fan service, but I'm also going to make it my own. Yeah. She screws up.
But then within 5 minutes, we learned that he's fine. It was a different ship.
Yeah,
that was a whole different ship.
We hadn't even seen. Like, there's just no.
And it was so nonchalant the way it was kind of said. Like one of the First Order guys is just like, oh, we have a prisoner because we had a second ship. You know, it's like,
this is why.
Yeah, right.
And I'm sorry.
And then the C-3PO was the other one.
Oh, terrible.
I'm like, wiping his memory clean. I'm like, oh, okay, that's kind of cool. He's going to be like this fresh, like droid. And then, like, honestly, by the end of the film, R2-D2 is like, oh, by the way, here you go. Boop, boop. Here's all your memories back. And
it's just done for comedic relief, too, because they want to have him make jokes, which I'm so done with C-3PO trying to be funny.
Well,
it worked when I was 8 years old.
I just thought, when they were wiping his memory, I'm like, oh, okay, that's kind of a ending moment for this droid. I get it, and that's cool. But then, like, yeah. And then you get comic relief with him being like not knowing who anybody is and all that. But then when R2-D2 gives him his memories back, I'm like, really? You couldn't even let that thing stick, And
here's something else he's afraid to do, which I feel like the script was afraid to do. I shouldn't say J.J. Abrams, but this movie was afraid to do. Let's just leave it that way. In Last Jedi, the way it ends with Luke Skywalker, people fussed because they're like, oh, that's a Jedi power. We've never seen it. And they got all upset. With this movie, which the character design was actually kind of disappointing for me, but there's like this sandworm thing, and she does this healing thing. You're like, okay, that's new. Well, she's not they're not satisfied just to let her do that. No, they're going to then explain, oh, I took some of my life force and I did this. And you're like, okay, wonder if this is going to come back. Not only does it come back once, but it comes back twice. And I'm just like, okay, I just really.
That was some of those plot contrivances and conveniences that just didn't work for me. And, so Palpatine, which
I guess we could have mentioned his name in the original.
Yeah, he was in the trailer.
In the trailer, you hear his voice.
Pretty much been acknowledged that he's in the film. I will say I love the fact that they just dropped it on you right in the crawl. Yep, he's there.
Could have written it better.
But I'm like, I loved it. I'm like, actually, the crawl. I realize what you're saying about the writing of it was not great, but this crawl was the first one I think where I actually read it and be like, oh wow, okay,
well
that's where we're starting this film, and that's an interesting place to start.
And it was, and that's what immediately made me think, that's interesting, because what they did is they set it up where it's not Palpatine and his taken control of Kylo Ren. It was set up kind of like, no, Kylo's ticked that Palpatine's still around because he wants all the power for himself. He wants to
find out where this guy is. Yeah.
So that whole power struggle, if they had kept that as kind of like a through line of the film, like Rey's trying to get to Kylo or trying to beat him so he can't find the Emperor because he's building this whole, like if they'd kind of kept that dynamic, but no, he finds him in the opening,
he finds him in the first 15 minutes and Emperor basically is like, oh yeah, why don't you help me do this and it'll be cool. And Kylo's like, yeah, okay, cool. That's what we'll do.
Okay. We got to take up some time for this film somehow.
Yeah.
So yeah, it wasn't, you're right. It wasn't the fact that Palpatine was back. And I thought it was interesting. And some of the battle scenes that do happen with him towards the end of the film too are very cool and very satisfying, but it's just the execution of it was just so disappointing.
I'll say with Palpatine, when they first showed him, and he is basically almost like a reanimated corpse.
Oh, he is,
which is awesome.
Yeah, he's kind of a life support.
If you're going to do this, let's do it really creepy and cool, and it was. Yeah. And the fact that he was kind of hung by some sort of like robotic arm thing that was kind of moving him around because he obviously didn't have like his full body or full control of his limbs. I'm like, okay, if you're going to do the Palpatine thing, this is good. This is really good. Like his face only was illuminated when there was lightning and it was like these dead eyes. And it was like, okay, I'm totally digging this. I'm like, I am absolutely on board with where they're going with this now. And that was the thing I was the most worried about with this film. Something
that expressed how Billy D. Williams and Lando Calrissian just that didn't work for me. Something that surprised me, I will say, since we're in spoilers, I can talk about it. Surprised me that they A, did it, and that B, it really worked and was not cheesy at all for me. I really liked it. I responded. You said some of the other things, like the ending I thought was terrible. I hated the Ewoks popping up. Like, it was terrible. All that I really didn't like. However, Harrison Ford's bit, I loved it.
Well,
it worked for me. I didn't think it would, but it worked for me. It worked for me.
Well, I'll tell you, awesome. I actually, and what I alluded to in the previous part of the review about the way that the Kylo Rey story resolved itself and ended, I totally dug. I liked. I know people are going to have some complaints about Kylo Ren's turn and redemption because by the end he's become a good guy.
But let's be honest,
I like
who didn't see that coming?
But I loved it, and actually the fact that it was Leia reaching out to him kind of turned him a little bit, and then seeing Han Solo talking to him in his memories. I'm like, okay, yeah, you got me. That worked. And I bought it.
Yeah,
so.
and actually, I will say credit to the film, but I didn't want to mention this in the other thing because you don't want to do spoilers. Although everybody knows she dies at the end of Last Jedi, or knows the character. Like, you assume she's going to die in this movie because how could she not? Because you know that Carrie Fisher's dead. The way, if you're going to do the whole, we have talked about on this show about using CGI of people, maybe it was all extra footage that they somehow cut around to work Carrie Fisher in. I'm assuming it wasn't. I'm assuming there was a little bit of stealing dialogue and doing stuff. You know, who knows how they did it. But for what it was, it actually, I felt like, was pretty effective.
Yeah.
It wasn't really overdone. And the way her character does pass away, because she uses her into, like, I was very satisfied with how I did that.
I was too.
And, you know, to give another strength to the film, being a little positive, I remember one of the things you talk about, you know, flushing everything from Last Jedi down the toilet. I'm not going to say, I mean, maybe they didn't do a lot, but at least they didn't make Rey Luke's daughter.
Well, that's the other thing I was going to talk about.
They didn't make him Han Solo's daughter and Leia's daughter a secretive daughter. Like, the way they kept her lineage, and they actually kind of brought through, but they didn't totally throw it out, because Kylo Ren's thing saying, like, yeah, you're basically from nobody. Basically, her parents more or less were nobodies, but it was who was her grandfather.
Kylo Ren kind of pulled a Obi-Wan Kenobi from A New Hope when Obi-Wan tells Luke, yeah, your father was killed by Darth Vader. Okay, well, not really. I mean, not, you know, literally. It's more figuratively. Kylo Ren's doing the same thing, saying, yeah, your parents were nobody. Okay, they themselves, the two of them,
because they chose not to do Force stuff.
Obviously, there was a deeper meaning there.
Right.
Yeah, when the whole thing, I mean, I knew they were going to announce something about her patronage, her parents.
Right.
I knew it. I knew J.J. Abrams was going to go back to that well and discount what Rian Johnson tried to pull off. I am pleased with the way that went, where it could have gone so much more down the expected route.
Yeah.
And the whole Palpatine thing, her being Palpatine's granddaughter, I'm like, okay, now that's kind of interesting. I'm actually okay with that too. So the things I was the most worried about with this film going in are actually the things they handled relatively well.
The things that you thought were going to be strictly fan service. Oh, Palpatine comes back because, you know, who he's Return of the Jedi. That actually works for the film. It's the unexpected, the things that were fan service that you didn't know about going in were just kind of me. I mean, I literally rolled my eyes 5 or 6 times. I was just like, oh, they're doing that. Oh my gosh. It was so, and that's, I wish I had taken notes, but I didn't want to seem like a total dork because I was there with my kids. But I wish I would have taken notes. Like, I can't believe they did this.
I will tell you a couple moments that I almost cheered, happy that they did.
Did people in your screening cheer? Because people in mine did.
A couple did, yeah. Yeah, we had some. I love the moment when Kylo Ren has now basically become Ben Solo back again, and he's going to rescue Rey from the Emperor situation.
Gets a lightsaber.
The lightsaber moment I liked.
Yeah, our crowd cheered and clapped.
But I liked, my favorite part though is him coming down and he's got a blaster that looks very much like a Han Solo's blaster.
Yeah.
And he's actually taking out his Knights of Ren, and fighting them. That was cool. And he had, I don't know, it was subtle things, but he's like got a white shirt on. He's got his flowing black hair. He kind of did it was a little Han Solo-ish, like Rogue Solo thing. I'm like, yeah, okay, I totally bought that. I loved it. The lightsaber trick with transferring the lightsaber, which again is not something I knew Jedis could do until like the last movie or two, like transfer items between each other.
Right.
But okay, I'm buying it. It worked.
And pulling through that whole thing, which is something they did in all 3 movies, I believe, was them being able to force talk to one another. They did that in Force Awakens.
Fighting each other.
Right. They did that in Force Awakens, and they heightened it a little bit in Last Jedi, and then that was something that was a carry through that was a new thing.
I liked it.
I thought worked.
There was a moment where the two of them are fighting and Kylo Ren doesn't know where Rey is.
Yeah.
And then something gets knocked over. The old Darth Vader mask gets knocked over during the fight and he sees it. And he's like, oh, okay, now I totally know where she is. I'm like, I thought it was kind of cool. That was a good moment. So obviously when they can force time each other, they don't know where each other.
It's force time.
Yeah, they don't know where each other are. They can just see them. But
Was that original Alan Force Time?
no, I heard that somewhere.
Oh, man, I was going to give you credit because I was like, if that's at FaceTime and Force Time, that's awesome.
Yeah, no, I heard that somewhere after Last Jedi. I think that became kind of a meme.
That became a thing.
Yeah,
See, me not being up on memes, that hurts.
So I thought that was all a good moment. The whole resolution there. Yes, the bit with the Emperor and Rey and Kylo at the end was very Return of the Jedi-ish. Look at your friends up above; they're all dying, and you got to kill me to save them, type of thing.
But somehow,
it worked. It
worked because it was how they got there, and because it wasn't simple fan service. It was like, no, this is. It seemed earned. It was fan service that was earned, whereas some of the other stuff just.
I'll tell you another cool moment that I really dug when you realize you're there talking to Emperor Palpatine. And you realize that you're in this giant arena filled with these Sith disciples all watching you. And I'm like, okay.
Right.
That just got really cool right there.
Yeah, they're all in black cloaks and everything. Yeah. I wish they actually would have used that a little more, but
just something about the idea that it's not just, you're not just facing this one guy who's all powerful. Like there is an entire army of people surrounding you right now, watching you, waiting for you to succumb to the dark side. I'm like, okay, that was pretty cool. I like that bit a lot.
It was an interesting bit of, I guess, fan service, but it actually, again, I guess it's all opinion whether something is justified fan service or not. But Luke Skywalker popping back up, I knew he was going to. I think anybody, just like
sure.
Certain things are going to happen. Kylo Ren's going to turn good. I feel like that's a pretty safe assumption.
That was pretty well. I don't think Rian Johnson had any intention of that after Last Jedi necessarily. I think Rian Johnson was ready to make Kylo Ren full on bad guy. But I think J.J. Abrams always wanted Kylo Ren to come back and to pull a Darth Vader at the end of Return of the Jedi and be the one that saves the day.
Right.
Yeah, I agree. All right, I'm going to mention a moment that got me. It is absolute ridiculous fan service. It is so over the top, so makes no sense how this would have come together. And you probably rolled your eyes. But I still will say,
like I said, there's a lot.
I rolled my eyes at a lot of fan service moments in this film. There's one moment though that I had to kind of geek out about with my wife and kids afterwards because they had no idea what it meant. Chewie's medal.
Oh my gosh. Terrible.
I loved it.
Terrible.
I loved it. Only because
I definitely rolled my eyes at that.
I know you did.
And unfortunately that was so it's how a film starts and how a film ends that determines a lot of your opinion, because sometimes you tend to forget what happens in the middle. Yeah. And the
thing is, the problem is, if there had been no other moments like that in the film that were just so blatantly over the top fan service, it would have been perfect. Because I'm going to afford them one.
What did he even do in this movie? He didn't even do anything to deserve a medal. But it was like if he had, then maybe it would make sense. Like, we're finally making right. You did something awesome. We're giving. No, it's
Chris,
just
more like a body of work award.
Right. So, Chewie, you've kind of been
around. You're like one of the only originals that didn't die in this movie. So congratulations, you get an award.
Right.
It did work for me because it was something where we walk out in the parking lot afterwards. I'm just like, okay, guys, do you understand what that was supposed to be for? Because fans have been so pissed off about that for years that Chewie didn't get a medal and a New Hope. And I'm like, you know what? I'm okay with it.
Chewie got a medal.
I'm okay with it. I wish that was the only obvious fan service moment. Everything else didn't. Lando didn't work.
No. And I feel bad for Billy D. Williams because it was like, I felt like, it was like, oh, people are, just demanding that I be in this because I'm one of the original people and they all want, so it's like, okay, I'll be in it. But then there was
just give me something to do. Right. Oh, I have nothing to do. Okay, good to know.
I'll just smile and kind of.
So I just get to sit in Millennium Falcon and recreate my moment from Return of the Jedi.
That was so terrible too. Because that to me didn't seem earned. Him being in the movie wasn't earned, and then him flying in to save the day at the last minute
with everybody. I'm like where all these hundreds and thousands of ships all got to this mysterious planet that nobody knows how to get to, show up at the exact same moment.
And you have to have. That's why Poe's.
It's like Dunkirk, but completely unrealistic.
And that's why Poe's arc in this movie. Nothing against Adam Driver, or not Adam Driver, but the other guy's name. I'm blanking on his name right now. The guy who plays Poe.
Oscar Isaac.
Yes, thank you, Oscar Isaac. Great actor, but that's why his arc in this movie didn't work for me. It did in Last Jedi, but not here because the whole time he's like, hope, hope, hope. And then he's like, oh no, I'm sorry guys, I failed you. And he's up flying around, but nope, Lando, like that's how that just seems so terrible fan service. So that didn't, and it was nothing against, Oscar Isaac, but his character in this movie.
I liked Oscar Isaac in it. I just, I felt like they still struggle with what to do with Poe and Finn in all these movies.
Well, and I feel like they struggled to do, which I guess in one sense, great that you didn't take, because, there was a lot of, I guess if you call them fans, but they were fans of Star Wars that hated Rose Tico.
Yeah.
That absolutely just hated her. So much so that apparently the actress deleted her Instagram account. She's in this film, but it's such a thankless thing. It's why bother putting her in? Just take her. If you're not going to give her anything to do. So I think it was great that they at least didn't erase her, because that way it lets the people who hated her win. But in a way, it's just like,
I almost rather she not be in the film.
That's what I'm
if they're
saying.
not going to do anything. And I get it that maybe J.J. Abrams had no interest in exploring whatever was going on between Rose and Finn in Last Jedi, but there was a connection with those two.
Oh yeah.
And you could not tell from this film at all. I mean, that they barely even knew each other.
Well, I think she kind of at one point makes a little
to him, but you never know with Finn. Is he just good friends with Rey, or does he love Rey? There's something he wants to tell Rey that he never gets to tell her, and we still don't know what that is. Yeah. And then it's like, okay, but now there's this Jenna or whoever the former stormtrooper woman who are they going to become a thing now? They seem to be kind of hitting it off, but then they don't. And it's like, I just don't think they know what to do with Finn. That's the character that just is a wasted character for me, where you got such a great backstory you could have explored. The guy was a freaking stormtrooper. The use of horses on a planet made sense. The use of horses galloping across a spaceship that's moving. At one point, the Empire said something like, "Oh, we'll destabilize, scramble their thing." They're like, "We can't because they're not using." So the idea is that because there's no technology involved, they're not machines that they could scramble and control. All right. When I saw that shot in the first trailer of horses running down the side of the ship, I thought, "Oh my gosh, this looks bad." I get it. The big ships are not up in space; they're hovering over a planet, so gravity's not an issue. You can stand and walk on these things. They're not really moving either; they're all just kind of sitting there.
I guess.
So it's okay. I get it. It's all right. I kind of just went with that. I was all right with it. Yeah, it's just there's so many problems with this film.
Yeah.
So many things that did not work. So many things unnecessarily put in there. But it got me in the ending. I know the ending didn't work for you, but kind of looking at it as a culmination of 9 movies, and it was fine. I liked it. I came out. I was,
And you're ready to go see it again?
I kind of want to see it again, not because I'm just so excited to go see it again. I kind of want to see it again to say, look, I know where it's going. I want to see if any of this stuff works for me better, knowing where it ends.
Well, and that's why I feel like I need to see it again to truly evaluate. Gut reaction is I like it less than Force Awakens. Mm-hmm. But I had to see Force Awakens. I've seen it many times, but I had to see it twice to let go of my original judgments about it. So I feel like I need to see this twice to say, where does it truly fall?
Well, I'll just say this. I did not get emotional at all in Force Awakens. To me, Force Awakens was more like an exercise. It's like, yep, you got to introduce new characters and you got to harken back to the original trilogy. You got to please the fans. And look, we're just going to carbon copy one of the big plots from the previous films. So at the end of the film, I'm like, even Han Solo's death didn't affect me the way I was hoping it did in that film, just because I felt like the movie was too routine and just too focused on pleasing fans and making them forget about the prequels. This movie, I will say, got me in a few moments. I thought the Han Solo moment was really nice and emotional. I thought
that was well done.
I thought Leia's passing was well done and kind of made sense for the story. I thought, as much as I kind of complained that they don't know what to do about Finn and sometimes Poe, Poe, and Rey kind of reunion at the end, and just you see how good friends they are. I'm like, it worked for me. It's like it was emotional. It was good.
Maybe, but I felt at that point I'd been so beaten over the head with shots of random people hugging and reuniting.
Oh yeah. There was a lot of it, but I was okay with the ending. I mean, it was very Return of the Jedi-ish. Yeah. Let's show all these planets and people that are all happy that the First Order is gone, and it works. I mean, this is the ending. This is it. This is. you got to have that closure ending, and I think they pulled it off okay. So let me ask you the last little spoiler bit for this conversation. What was your take, or how did you respond? Was it eye roll or not? The very last moment, the coda, last scene on Tatooine. This is Rey.
Yeah,
you see the last shot. Rey.
It worked.
Rey goes back to Tatooine with BB-8. She goes back to the birthplace or the home of Luke Skywalker. She's seeing that for the first time.
I tell you what.
She buries Luke and Leia's lightsaber in the ground there. And then an old woman kind of passing by comes back, asks who she is, and she says, "It's Rey. What's your last name?" There's a pause. She sees Luke and Leia Force Ghost next to her. She's like, "My Rey Skywalker." End of the movie. The two sons, done. I loved it. I thought it was great.
Overall, it worked.
Yeah.
I liked it. It didn't seem like ridiculous fan service. I like the fact that she has a yellow lightsaber, so it's like she's made her own, just like Luke did when he made his green one. Something about that, though, what bothered me, everything, her saying Skywalker and actually seeing the Force ghosts of Luke and Leia, it works, but I kind of feel like, in a way, she's ditching her parents.
Well, I thought
there's
that
nothing
too.
like her parents never did her wrong. They left her because they were trying to run away from the Palpatine and everything. So in a way, I kind of wish like she'd done Rey Palpatine Skywalker, hyphenated. She's like, I'm not running away from it, but that's not because it has a negative association.
I thought that too. But the thing is, she never knew her parents. She, her parents made a sacrifice for her, but yet she never knew
and
them.
her parents can't Force ghost because, could they? Could the dad? Because maybe he had a little bit of Jedi power because that's how she got it because it was handed down. Like, I felt like in a way it was a little bit of a slight to her parents who did nothing wrong. But
but Luke and Leia truly later, they're the only parents she really knew.
Sure.
And it worked.
They were like adoptive parents and she was appreciating them.
And they basically were the ones who helped her become who she is and all that.
And
so
it was kind of an interesting.
I thought it was a great ending. I guess that's probably that little coda ending did enough for me to put me on a much more positive view coming out of the movie theater.
There was something it's like I go back and forth. The more I talk about some of the fan service things, some of them I do appreciate. I liked the use of the X-Wing that was on the planet that Luke had been because people complain like, why didn't he use it? Why didn't he use that?
Well,
and then this one, he now raises it up. And
but it's
like
also, I felt like that was also a slap back to Last Jedi. It's like, look, see, Luke could raise the X-Wing fighter. So anybody, Rian Johnson saying he didn't do it or didn't want to use it, it's like, look, he can totally do it. And he
didn't, but when I agree, he didn't want to do it. Rian Johnson, he didn't want to do it, but
I still felt like it was I love the moment, but I did feel like it was a little bit of see, he could do it. So, you fans keep asking why he didn't do it in Last Jedi because he could totally do it. And,
right. Somehow it worked for him.
No, I liked the moment. I really did. And again, I tried as much as I could to watch this movie, not comparing it or thinking about Last Jedi, but it's really tough not to because I do feel like the film is just, it's really interesting to see two filmmakers trying to have a different take on the same story.
Right.
But yet you're giving the previous filmmaker a chance to go back and right any wrongs they kind of felt like happened before. I mean, it's just interesting. It's really interesting. The biggest thing for me with this whole saga is I'm still shocked that I don't feel like they really had a plan for this trilogy when they started.
That's kind of interesting.
Baffling to me.
Yeah.
I even felt like the original Star Wars, which, George Lucas did not think initially he was going to be making more than one Star Wars. It was going to be a single movie. But yet, when you watch those three original movies, it looked like part of a big plan. Like it was all tied together. It made sense. There was a progression. These three movies, I just felt like it was kind of like, well, one moved forward, one moved it to the left, and then this one tried to move it back to the right again. It's like it was an odd mixture of films, and I just don't feel like they had a real good through line for the whole trilogy, which is still baffling to me. How do you not invest in a new trilogy of Star Wars movies and not have some idea of where it's going to go? I felt like each one was making up its story as it went along, which was baffling. So
I would agree. The new trilogy, it is kind of surprising considering it's in the Disney house now. They had the arc for the 22 films with the Marvel superheroes. So you would have thought, and maybe there is.
Well, and I do think maybe, I think, and again, I loved Last Jedi, but I do think Rian Johnson probably threw some curveballs that they didn't really anticipate. And I think Colin Trevorrow, they realized at the last minute that was not a pathway that was going to work for them, the storyline he had. So I realized they had to make some adjustments and kind of change as the game went along, but still just kind of odd. I felt like we're watching two separate storylines altogether. The J.J. Abrams storyline, the Rian Johnson storyline.
So here we are, we're wrapping things up, but this has occurred to me because I thought to say it earlier. Here's the thing. A lot of people hate Solo and hate Rogue One. I would take either one of those over Rise of Skywalker. Because now the beginning parts of Solo that we've talked about, that was messy and everything. But then once he gets hooked up with
I'm kind of with you. I mean, I definitely like both those films better than Force Awakens. I have to kind of think. I have to see Rise of Skywalker again to make a final determination on that.
Well, probably so do I. But
I'm very confident in saying that of these three new films, it is Last Jedi for me, Rise of Skywalker, Force Awakens. That's not going to change, that order of three. I just feel like, again, this at least had some interesting things happening, and it did a nice closure on the main storylines compared to Force Awakens, which still feel like was just not very creative or imaginative at all. So, yeah.
Okay.
Have we tackled it?
I think we have.
We dissected it enough?
Yes.
We never even really said what the plot of the film was, but does it really matter?
Well, I mean, that's the thing.
I think everybody understands it. I mean,
I guess. Yeah, yeah.
But we didn't really ever set up the plot. I guess we just assumed everybody would know.
Emperor's back and he's going to take over the universe.
Yeah, basically. The First Order.
Yeah.
Kylo Ren's running First Order. And then Emperor comes back and has a bigger plan for bringing the Sith back. And yeah.
The mole on the inside of the First Order was actually I thought that was cool.
I liked it.
And the reveal of who it is, and then why he actually says why he was doing it. He's like, I don't want you to win. I just want Kylo Ren to live. I thought that was very honest, and it was well done.
And it played off his character, because he's been the only consistent character in this trilogy, I think,
true.
in a way. Well, he and probably, I think Kylo Ren has been fairly consistent. But Hux, Hux has been a weasel since the first moment we meet him.
Yep.
And I liked the moment when they were about to be executed, Finn and Poe, and then Hux shoots the actual stormtroopers. I'm like, okay, that was nice.
Let's talk about fan service.
Okay, so we're not done yet.
We're not
done.
Good. I keep thinking of things.
Sure.
It's Star Wars. We knew we weren't going to do 2 reviews for a reason. When that moment happens with the almost execution, and Poe and Hux actually have this kind of back and forth dialogue, if you remember back in Force Awakens, I believe, it was Force Awakens, Poe has this joking dialogue with Hux, and they're kind of doing this silly thing. So they have had this relationship. So this conversation is kind of that microphone, kind of a callback to that. And that was a callback that I was okay with, because it was like, remember these guys have this relationship of everything, and now,
they even played off it more in Last Jedi. That was the very first scene in Last Jedi. I remember as Poe calling in to talk to Hux.
Okay, that's the one I was. So it was Lost Jedi, not
Last Jedi. That was Last Jedi with the whole.
It was like a phone call
type of thing.
Yeah.
So they have this very antagonistic relationship, and so it worked. And no, I was good with that. And then I loved even Richard E. Grant's character, saying, shooting Hux and being like, "Yeah, we found our mole." So it's like,
Okay, here's what, in full transparency too. Here's why he could have been given more, but the fact he wasn't kind of worked for me, because the Sith, they always have these shadow people, and you don't know who's an apprentice and who's not an apprentice. So Palpatine, he was a senator and you never really knew what he was doing. He was kind of underhanded. This guy's working for the First Order, but it's the whole time.
You're talking about Richard E. Grant's character?
Yeah.
Okay.
He's basically working for the Sith, but he's in the First Order, but he just kind of is doing stuff. But, you come to find out kind of, when he talks to Palpatine, he's basically like a Darth Maul type person that's hidden within, and he looks just like, I'm marching around doing whatever Kylo Ren tells me, but I'm secretly working for you. So he was actually a mole within the First Order for Palpatine in a way. So that kind of worked, that they didn't do a whole lot with him, because it was kind of like I get where this guy's truly coming from. So I liked it. But
yeah. Are we done now?
Yeah. We're done.
Okay. I don't have anything else to say.
The saga can end.
So right now, what would your star rating be on a 1 to 5 stars?
1 to 5, probably 2.5.
Yeah, I was going to guess you were going to do 2.5.
Yeah.
I'm between 3 and 3.5 because I did like it more.
The more last night when I walked out of the theater at 1 o'clock in the morning, it was probably 2.
Yeah.
But the more I think about it and the more I try to get over myself, I'm thinking, well, I just can't give it the 3 because of too many fan service. It's the fan service that keeps it from being a 3.
I understand. Absolutely. That's the thing that keeps me from really liking this film. I'm at 3. If I see it again, I might be at 3.5. I mean, I did enjoy it. I had a good time. Once I turned my brain off and stopped trying to be frustrated about some of the choices they were making and trying to not pay attention to the plot, which was just dumb and horribly written, I ultimately had a good time with the film.
It had the clunkiness of a Transformers movie to dump on the Transformers franchise, but which we do a lot. I haven't done it in a while, but that's what was surprising to me.
It was more clunky than I'm used to for these. Yeah. So I'm at 3 right now. 3 to me is like, all right. You can watch it. It's fine. It's good. Nothing to write home about, but it's okay.
Sure.
But for what it's worth, my son, my 13-year-old son, who's kind of my movie partner, and we end up watching a lot of stuff together. He really liked it, and we both went in with very low expectations. So I think it works. I think it. Anybody who did not like Last Jedi, if you're one of those people, you're right. Probably will really like this kind of movie.
Probably.
If you liked Force Awakens, yeah, this is Force Awakens like on steroids, basically. But for me, who liked Last Jedi, I still found enough with this one to say that I thought it was, at the end of the day, it was fine. Just, man, J.J. Abrams, he's a director that I had so much respect for back when he first started. The whole Alias TV show I thought was wonderful. I really liked his Mission Impossible movie. And I liked how he set up Lost and that TV show, kind of creating the concept of that. So when he did Super 8, and I realized he's just aping Spielberg, then he did Force Awakens much later than that, and I felt like that was just aping the original Star Wars movies. And now this one, I feel like was just kind of a mess written wise. I don't know. I'm not confident in him as a director anymore like I used to be. So I feel like he just plays too much to try to twist people's expectations, but at the end of the day, he's still going to give you what you want, fan service wise, and that's no fun. That's not a creative way to make films. So, okay, I think we're done.
Okay,
officially done.
Yeah, see you in the ticket line.
All right, take care. Thanks, everybody. All right, bye.
Watch films in the company of like-minded people in the dark. Watch films in the underground. We won't let anyone know where you are. The films that don't make it to Carmike at the mall, or ones that were famous when Grandpa would watch films out of the reverence of the heritage of an art. Watch films through the courtesy of Footcandle Film Society.
Special thanks to Carpal Tuller for the show theme music. For more about Carpal Tuller, visit www.carpaltuller.com. You've been listening to The Mesh, an online media network of shows and programs ranging from business to arts, sports to entertainment, music to community. All programs are available on the website as well as through iTunes and YouTube. Check us out online at themesh.tv. Discover other network shows and give us feedback on what you just heard.